Gothic Horror, Negative Aesthetics in Dracula and A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night by Jackie Beer. Voting rights and negative aesthetics informs Gothic texts. These texts were first produced in the 18th century, while the ordered and rational Enlightenment was establishing itself as a dominant way of thinking, and they often seemingly oppose the core ideas of this movement. The moods, atmospheres, looks, and connotations of the Gothic genre are characterized by the absence of light, which is associated with security, sense, and knowledge. The interplay of light and dark is evident in the conventions, settings, characters, devices, and effects specific to Gothic texts. The physical locations and settings manifest disturbance and ambivalence, and are often sites that are tempered with decay. This is heavily influenced by the idea of the sublime. Aesthetic theories, most notably the theory of the sublime, emerged in the 18th century, where they informed the revival of Gothic and Romantic cultural forms. Burke discussed the effects of the sublime in the way it combined delight and horror, pleasure and terror. It contrasts the pleasing balance of beauty by resulting from a disrupted sense of order and discombobulation of reason, imagination, and feeling, where intensities, magnitudes, and violent contrast overwhelm mental faculties, evoking terror, awe, wonder, and threaten the eclipse of any subjective unity. Gothic styles disturb the borders of knowing and often depict disturbances of sanity and security, from superstitious beliefs in ghosts and demons, displays of uncontrolled passion, violent emotions, or fights of fancy, to portrayals of perversion and obsession. Knowledge and understanding do not constitute a primary aim of Gothic texts. What counts is the production of effects and emotions, which are often extreme and negative. Gothic texts are not morally, socially, or aesthetically good. They are instead concerned with vice. Often protagonists are selfish or evil, and adventures involve decadence or crime. Gothic horror in particular is interested in transgression of social norms and fears associated with these transgressions. In this way, they can be thought of as cautionary tales for society. Transgressors move beyond norms and regulations. Monsters combine negative features that oppose and define the norms, conventions, and values. They suggest an excess or absence beyond those structures and bear the weight of projections and emotions that result. Monsters such as vampires are thus constructions indicating how cultures need to invent or imagine others in order to maintain limits. The appearance or actions of monstrosity in these texts marks the refusal to stay in an allotted place, a destabilization of power relations. Dracula, by Bram Stoker, was first published in 1897. The epistolary narrative is an early example of a Gothic horror text. Dracula contains many elements of a negative and dark aesthetic, including Dracula's castle and English manor, the asylum, and the storms and night activity that occur many times during the novel. Dracula's castle is described as large and old, labyrinthine in some parts, such as when Jonathan is first shown to his room, and again later when he is attempting to find an escape. Dracula's English manor is described by Jonathan as an ancient structure built of stone that has not been repaired in a large number of years. Dr. Stewart's asylum brings to mind many unsettling images and is also set in an isolated area. Much of the interaction with the vampires in the novel occurs during the night, at a time of shadow and darkness. In particular, Jonathan describes his first meeting with Dracula, which happened at night. This is an eerie ride to the castle where he mentions the blue flames flickering through the trees in the dark. Also, Dracula's arrival in England is described as having occurred during the greatest and suddenest storm on record. There are also many transgressions covered in the text, including presentation of female sexuality, homosexuality, and the reverse colonization of England. Free female sexuality is presented as monstrous, with the three wives who freely attempt to seduce Jonathan together, and later what happens to Lucy, after she had expressed a wish to marry all three of her suitors. This leaves Minna alone, presented as a dutiful and helpful wife, who is saved from Dracula. Homosexuality in Stoker's time was pathologized and illegal. This makes Dracula's attempted seduction of Jonathan on his first night at the castle, and Dracula's cry of "This man belongs to me" to his wives, highly transgressive. The reverse colonization of England, represented in Dracula's invasion of London, is also based on a Victorian fear. The revision of the Gothic. As time has passed, social norms have changed, and so has the way in which we read and understand Gothic texts. In the first few decades of the 20th century, a sense of ghostliness pervaded the times and techniques of literary presentation. With new media such as films, there also became new ways of telling Gothic stories, and the black and white world of the screen made the shadow play, terror, and disorientation of Gothic aesthetics its own. The changes in social norms, such as the Victorian attitudes being swept away as Gothic forms and figures began to tell different stories in contexts of sexual, national, and social liberation. This is particularly evident in women writing the Gothic, which often re-examines Gothic images of femininity and masculinity to challenge the constraining artifice of sexual and social categories, liberating sexual differences from normative constraints. The 2015 film A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night was written and directed by Anna Lily Amirpour and features a female vampire, the girl, in the fictional Iranian Bad City. The film is presented in black and white and uses the play of light and shadow in the visual aesthetic. Also, Bad City, with its rundown buildings, dry river full of bodies, and general feeling of not being a good place, is an eerie and unsettling setting for the narrative. There are multiple references to vice in the film, including drugs and prostitution. There are characters such as drug dealer and pimp Saeed, junkie Hossein, rich party girl Shader, and Arash, who takes over the drug dealing business. There is also the prostitute Atty. In respect to female sexuality, unlike in Dracula, the film inverts the convention that bad things happen to females for overt sexuality, with the female characters surviving the film for the most part unscathed. And the girl herself is only ever sexualized when she chooses to be, such as when she attacks Saeed. This concludes this presentation. Thank you for watching.